I have spent a lot of time thinking about patterns. Not the kind you notice right away, the kind that only make sense years later, the kind that sit in your memory like disconnected dots until one day something clicks and you see the whole picture. I am going to tell you about 5 times that happened to me and to people I know. 5 times when we realized we had been watched for much longer than we thought. The first story is mine. It starts when I was 11 years old. My family lived in a small house in a suburban neighborhood outside of Pittsburgh. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard with a chain link fence. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, or at least recognized faces. My bedroom was on the second floor facing the street. I had a desk by the window where I did homework. I liked looking out at the neighborhood while I worked, watching cars go by, watching people walk their dogs, watching the seasons change. Our street was called Maple Avenue. It was a dead-end street with maybe 20 houses total. Most of the families had lived there for years. The Johnsons across the street, the Martinez family next door, old Mrs. Patterson 2 houses down who always had her Christmas lights up too early. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved when they drove past, where kids played outside until the streetlights came on, where everyone felt safe. There was a man who walked past our house every evening, always around 6:30, always the same route. He was older, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He wore a tan jacket and walked slowly, with his hands in his pockets. I noticed him because he was so regular. Like clockwork, 6:30 every single evening. I would see him walk past going one direction, and then maybe 10 minutes later he would walk back the other direction. I assumed he lived nearby and was just getting exercise. My dad walked the neighborhood sometimes too. It was normal. I remember the first time I really paid attention to him. It was October. I was doing homework at my desk working on a social studies project about state capitals. It was getting dark early because of the time change. The streetlights had just come on. I looked up from my work and saw the man walking past. He was looking at the houses as he walked. Not in a suspicious way, just looking, the way people do when they walk. I went back to my homework. One night, maybe a week later, I was at my desk doing math homework. It was winter by then, so it got dark early, maybe 5:30 or 6. I looked up from my work and saw the man standing across the street. Not walking, just standing. He was looking at our house, at my window, I think. I stopped writing and watched him. He did not move, he just stood there, maybe for a full minute. Then he turned and walked away. I did not think much of it at the time. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was looking at something else. Maybe he dropped something and was trying to find it. I went back to my homework. But then I saw him standing there again a few days later. Same spot, same posture, just standing and looking. I mentioned it to my mom. I was in the kitchen helping her with dinner. I said there is a man who stands across the street sometimes. She asked what he looked like. I described him. She said she had seen him walking but had never noticed him standing there. She looked out the window, but he was already gone. She said maybe he is waiting for a ride or checking his phone. That made sense. I let it go. Over the next few months, I saw him standing there maybe a dozen times. It was never predictable. Sometimes on weekdays, sometimes on weekends, sometimes in the evening when it was dark, sometimes in the afternoon when I was home from school. Always across the street, always facing our house. I started closing my curtains more often. I did not like the feeling of being watched, even if it was probably nothing. My parents noticed I was closing my curtains. My mom asked me why. I told her about the man. She said if it bothered me, I should just ignore it. She said he probably was not even looking at our house specifically. She said maybe he liked looking at the trees, or the sunset or something like that. That sounded reasonable. I tried to believe it, but I could not shake the feeling. When I was at my desk, even with the curtains closed, I felt like someone was watching. I started doing my homework in the living room instead. Downstairs, away from the window. Then one day, maybe in March or April, he was not there anymore. I did not see him walking past. I did not see him standing across the street. Weeks went by. A month. 2 months. I assumed he had moved or changed his routine. I felt relieved. I started using my desk again. I opened my curtains. I forgot about him. Years passed. I went to middle school. I started high school. I made friends. I joined the soccer team. I got interested in photography. The man became a vague memory, just something odd from childhood that I barely thought about anymore. But then, When I was 17, something happened that brought it all back. It was summer. I had a job at a local grocery store bagging groceries and stocking shelves. I worked evening shifts, usually from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. I was driving home from work one night. It was late, maybe 10:30. Our street was quiet. Most people were already in bed. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the car. As I was getting out, I noticed a car parked down the street. It was a dark sedan, maybe a Honda or a Toyota. The headlights were off, but I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. I could not see their face, but I could see the shape of a person, just sitting there. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, watching the car. The person did not move. I felt uneasy. After a few seconds, I went inside. I locked the door behind me. My parents were already asleep. I mentioned it to my dad the next morning. I said there was someone parked down the street last night. He asked what time. I said around 10:30. He looked out the window, but of course the car was gone. He said it was probably someone visiting a neighbor. Or maybe someone on their phone finishing a conversation before going inside. That made sense. I let it go. But the car kept appearing. Not every night. Maybe once a week, sometimes less, sometimes twice a week. Always parked in the same spot. About 4 houses down from ours. Always with someone sitting inside. I started paying attention. I started taking note of when I saw it. I had a journal I kept for photography notes, and I started writing it down in there. June 12th, June 19th, June 27th, July 9th, July 14th. The dates were irregular, but the car was always the same dark sedan, always parked in the same spot. I told my parents again. My mom said maybe it is someone working a night shift who parks there to decompress before going home. She said some people do that. They sit in their car for a few minutes to transition from work to home. My dad said maybe it is a private investigator working a case in the neighborhood. He said that happens sometimes. Their explanations sounded reasonable. I wanted to believe them. But I could not shake the feeling that the car was there because of us. Because of me. One night in late July, I decided to test it. I left the house at 11 and drove around the block. When I came back, the car was still there. I parked in our driveway and sat in my car, watching. The person in the sedan did not move. I could not see any details. Just a dark shape. I waited for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. My heart was beating fast. Finally, the car started and drove away slowly. I tried to see the license plate, but it was too dark and the car did not pass under a streetlight. I started feeling paranoid. I started closing the curtains in my room every night. I stopped sitting by the window. I started parking my car in the garage instead of the driveway. My parents noticed. My mom asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I did not want to worry them, and I did not want them to think I was being irrational. But the car kept appearing, once a week, twice a week, sometimes more. I started documenting everything, the time I saw it, the weather, whether anyone else was home. I filled pages in my journal. I thought maybe if I collected enough information, I could figure out a pattern. Maybe I could figure out who it was. Then I went to college. I moved 3 hours away to State College. I did not come home often, maybe once a month. And when I did not see the car anymore. I would come home for a weekend, and I would check the street, and there would be nothing. I assumed whoever it was had moved on. I felt relieved. I thought it was over. College was good. I studied journalism. I made new friends. I had internships. I started thinking about my future. The car became another vague memory, something strange that had happened but was over now. But then, a few years later, my mom told me something that made my stomach turn. I was home for Thanksgiving. I was 21. We were in the kitchen, and she was showing me old photos she had been organizing. She was scanning them to digital files to preserve them. She handed me a photo from my 12th birthday party. It was taken in our backyard. My friends were there. There was a cake. I was smiling. It was a happy memory. But then my mom pointed to something in the background. Behind the fence you could see part of the street, and in that part of the street, standing on the sidewalk, was the man in the tan jacket. The man who used to walk past our house every evening. The man who used to stand across the street and watch. I stared at the photo. My mom said she did not even notice him until she was scanning it and zoomed in. I asked her to send me the digital file. She did. I zoomed in on his face on my laptop. He was looking directly at the camera. directly at me, and he was smiling. I felt cold. I asked my mom if she remembered him. She said no. She said she did not even notice him in the photo until she looked closely. I told her about how I used to see him standing across the street when I was a kid, how he would just stand there and watch. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she wished I had told her at the time. She said she would have called the police. But what could I have said? A man stands on a public sidewalk. A man looks at houses. There was no crime, no threat, just a feeling. I asked my mom if we had any other old photos. She said yes, boxes of them. We spent the next hour going through them, and we found him in 3 more photos, always in the background, always far away, always watching. A photo from a 4th of July barbecue when I was 10. A photo from a family gathering when I was 9. A photo from Halloween when I was 8. He was always there, always in the background, always watching. I asked my mom to look through her old home videos too. She had boxes of VHS tapes that she had not watched in years. We found an old VCR and hooked it up. We started watching, and there he was again. In a video from my 13th birthday, in a video from a neighborhood block party when I was 12. Always in the background, always watching. I felt sick. This man had been watching me for years, from the time I was 8 or 9 until I was at least 13, maybe longer. And I had only noticed the standing. I had never noticed him in the photos or videos. I had never realized how long it had been going on. I told my mom about the car, the dark sedan that used to park on our street when I was 17. She looked worried. She asked if I still saw it. I said, no. She said maybe it was unrelated. But I did not think so. I thought it was the same person. I thought he had been watching me for almost a decade, from childhood into my teenage years. My mom wanted to call the police, but I said no. What would we tell them? We found someone in the background of old photos? We saw a car parked on our street years ago. It was not enough. And it was too late. The photos were from years ago. The car was long gone. There was nothing they could do. Looking back, I realized the man and the car were probably connected. I realized I was being watched for years, from age 8 or 9 to age 17 or 18. Maybe longer. I do not know why. I do not know what they wanted, but I know it was deliberate. I know it was sustained. And I know I will never have answers. I still think about it sometimes, especially now. I am 28 now. I live in a different city. I have a job. I have a life. But sometimes I wonder if they are still watching, if they moved on to someone else. If they are reading this right now, I wonder if the man in the tan jacket is still alive. He would be in his 70s or 80s by now, if he is still alive. I wonder if he remembers me. I wonder if he kept photos. I wonder what he did with all those years of observation. And I wonder about the car, about the person who sat in that dark sedan night after night. I wonder if it was the same man, older, still watching, or if it was someone else. Someone he sent, someone he told about me. I have never felt completely safe since I found those photos. I check my windows. I check my locks. I look at the background of my own photos now, searching for faces I do not recognize. I notice cars that park on my street too often. I notice people who seem to be watching. Maybe I am paranoid. Maybe I am seeing patterns that are not there. Or maybe I am right. Maybe someone is still watching. Maybe they never stopped. Maybe they just got better at hiding. This is the next story. This one was told to me by a friend. I will call her Sarah. Sarah grew up in a rural area about an hour outside of Portland, Oregon. Her family lived on a property with about 10 acres of land. Their house was set back from the road, maybe a quarter mile down a gravel driveway, surrounded by dense woods on 3 sides. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. It was isolated, but Sarah said she always felt safe there as a child. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where you could hear the wind in the trees and nothing else. Their house was a 2-story farmhouse, built in the 1920s. It had been renovated over the years, but it still had that old house feel, creaky floors, drafty windows, a big wraparound porch. Sarah's bedroom was on the 2nd floor at the back of the house, overlooking the woods. She had a window seat where she would sit and read or do homework. When Sarah was around 9 or 10 years old, she started noticing something strange. At night, she would sometimes see a light in the woods behind their house. It looked like a flashlight. It would move slowly through the trees, back and forth, like someone was searching for something or walking a path. She mentioned it to her parents the first time she saw it. It was late, maybe 9 or 10 at night. She was getting ready for bed when she saw the light moving through the trees. She went downstairs and told her dad. He came up to her room and looked out the window, but the light was gone by then. He said it was probably a neighbor checking their property line or looking for a lost animal. That made sense. People in rural areas do that. Sarah went to bed and did not think about it again, but the light kept appearing. Not every night, maybe once a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. Sarah would see it from her bedroom window. She would watch it move through the trees for a few minutes, and then it would disappear. She got used to it. It became part of the background noise of living in the woods. Just something that happened sometimes, like hearing coyotes or seeing deer in the yard. When Sarah was 12, her family got a dog, a German shepherd named Duke. Duke was protective. He barked at strangers. He barked at delivery trucks. He barked at animals in the yard. Sarah's dad got Duke specifically for that reason, to alert them if anyone came onto the property, to keep them safe. But at night, sometimes Duke would stand at the back door and growl at the woods, not barking, just a low, sustained growl. The hair on his back would stand up. Sarah's mom would let him out, and he would run to the edge of the tree line and stand there, staring into the darkness. He would not go into the woods. He would just stand there, tense and alert, growling at something they could not see. Then, after a few minutes, he would come back inside, still tense. Sarah asked her dad if he thought someone was out there. Her dad said it was probably deer or raccoons, or maybe even a bear. Duke was just doing his job. That made sense. Sarah let it go. But then, when Sarah was 13, something happened that made her start to question everything. She was in her room one night, doing homework. It was winter, maybe February or March. It was cold and raining. She looked up from her book and saw the light in the woods. But this time, it was closer than usual. Much closer. It was maybe 50 feet from the house, just at the edge of the tree line. And it was not moving. It was just shining, pointed at the back of the house, at her window. Sarah felt a chill. She got up and turned off her bedroom light so she could see better. The light in the woods did not move. It stayed pointed at her window for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Then it turned off. Just went dark. Sarah stood there in the darkness, her heart pounding, waiting for it to come back on. It did not. She told her parents the next morning. Her dad said he would take a walk in the woods and see if he could find any sign of someone. He did. He walked the property line. He looked for footprints or broken branches or anything unusual. He did not find anything. The ground was wet from the rain, but there were no clear prints. He came back and told Sarah it was probably nothing. Probably just someone who got lost and was trying to find their way out. But Sarah did not believe that. She started paying closer attention. She started keeping a journal. Every time she saw the light, she would write it down, the date, the time, where it was, how long it lasted. She did this for over a year. She filled pages with observations. The light appeared irregularly. Sometimes weeks would go by with nothing. Then it would appear 3 or 4 times in one week. There was no clear pattern. But Sarah noticed that it seemed to appear more often in the winter, when the trees were bare and you could see deeper into the woods. When Sarah was 15, Duke died. He was old. He had lived a good life. Sarah's family was devastated. They buried him in the backyard, near the tree line. Sarah's dad said they would get another dog eventually, but they needed time to grieve. Without Duke, the house felt more vulnerable. There was no early warning system, no one to alert them if something was wrong. Sarah started feeling more anxious at night. She would lie in bed and listen to every sound, every creak, every rustle of wind. About a month after Duke died, Sarah was in her room on a Saturday afternoon. Her parents had gone into town for groceries. She was home alone, which was normal. She was 16 by then, old enough to be left alone for a few hours. She was in the living room watching TV when she heard Duke barking. But Duke was dead. She knew that. But she heard barking. It was coming from outside, from the backyard. She got up and went to the window. She did not see anything. The barking stopped. She told herself she had imagined it. She was thinking about Duke. Her mind was playing tricks on her. But then she heard it again. Barking. Frantic barking. Coming from the woods. Sarah opened the back door and stepped out onto the porch. The barking stopped. She stood there, listening. She heard nothing. She went back inside and locked the door. When her parents came home, she told them what happened. Her mom said maybe it was a neighbor's dog. Her dad said maybe it was coyotes. They make sounds that can sound like dogs sometimes. That made sense. Sarah tried to believe it. But then, a few weeks later, Sarah found something that changed everything. She was in the backyard cleaning up fallen branches after a storm. She was near the tree line, close to where Duke was buried. She saw something shiny caught in a bush. She walked over to see what it was. It was a trail camera, the kind hunters use to monitor wildlife. It was strapped to a tree, about chest height, pointed directly at the back of their house. At the windows. At the door. At her bedroom window on the second floor. Sarah's hands were shaking. She did not touch the camera. She ran inside and called her dad. He was at work, but he came home immediately. He went into the woods and took the camera down. He checked it. There was no SD card inside. Whoever put it there had already taken the footage. Sarah's dad called the police. They came out to the property. 2 officers. They took a report. They took the camera as evidence. But they said without knowing who put it there was not much they could do. The camera was on private property, which was illegal, but without a suspect they could not pursue it. They said it was probably kids playing a prank. They said they would increase patrols in the area. Sarah's dad did not believe it was kids. He started walking the property every day. He started looking for more cameras. And he found them. 2 more over the next 3 weeks, both pointing at the house. Both without SD cards. He took them down. He put up no trespassing signs all around the property. He talked to the neighbors, but no one had seen anything unusual. The cameras stopped appearing. But Sarah could not shake the feeling that someone was still watching. She started thinking about the light in the woods. The light she had seen for years. Since she was 9 or 10 years old, she realized it was not a neighbor checking property lines. It was someone coming onto their land, regularly, for years, watching them. She asked her parents if they remembered the light. Her mom said yes. She had seen it a few times over the years. Her dad said he thought it was just hunters or hikers with flashlights. But Sarah did not think so. She thought it was the same person who had put up the cameras. Someone who had been watching them for a long time. Maybe since before they even got Duke. Maybe since they first moved in. Sarah showed her parents her journal. All the dates and times she had written down. All the observations about the light. Her parents were shocked. They had not realized how often it had happened. They had not realized Sarah had been documenting it for years. Sarah's dad called the police again. He showed them the journal. He told them about the light. The officers said they would look into it, but they seemed skeptical. They said lights in the woods were common in rural areas. They said it was probably unrelated to the cameras. But they took copies of Sarah's journal entries anyway. Weeks went by. Nothing happened. Sarah's dad installed motion sensor lights around the house. He got a new dog, a younger German shepherd named Max. Max was trained to bark at intruders. He was protective, like Duke had been. And Max did bark. He barked at the woods all the time. At night, during the day, he would stand at the tree line and bark into the darkness. Sarah's dad would go out and check, but he never found anything. Then one night, about 6 months after they found the first camera, Sarah was in her room. It was late, maybe midnight. She was almost asleep when she heard Max barking frantically. She got up and looked out her window. She saw the light in the woods. But this time, it was not just one light. There were 3 lights, 3 flashlights, moving through the house. Sarah screamed for her parents. Her dad grabbed his shotgun and ran outside. Her mom called the police. Sarah watched from her window as her dad stood in the backyard with the gun, yelling into the woods. The lights stopped moving. They turned off. Sarah's dad stood there for a long time, waiting. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. They searched the woods with their flashlights. They did not find anyone. No footprints. Nothing. The officers told Sarah's family that they should consider installing security cameras of their own. They said if it happened again, having footage would help. Sarah's dad installed cameras the next week. 4 of them, covering all sides of the house, pointed at the woods. And for a while, nothing happened. No lights, no cameras, no sounds. Sarah started to feel like maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was had been scared off. Sarah moved out when she was 18. She went to college in Seattle. She did not come home often. The house felt tainted. She could not sleep in her old bedroom without feeling watched. Her parents still live in that house. They have lived there for over 20 years now. And sometimes, her mom tells her, Max still barks at the woods at night. And sometimes, Very rarely, they still see a light moving through the trees. Sarah told me this story a few years ago. She said she still does not know who it was. She does not know why they were being watched. But she knows it was real. She knows it went on for years before they even realized it. From the time she was 9 or 10 until she was 16, maybe longer. She knows someone was out there. Someone was documenting them. Sarah started thinking about all the years the light had appeared. All the times Duke had growled. All the small things that did not make sense. She realized that someone had been coming onto their property for years. Someone who knew their routines. Someone who knew when they would be home and when they would be away. She asked her parents to check the attic to see if there was any sign someone had been inside the house. They checked. They found scratches on the attic window frame, fresh scratches. The window had been forced open from the outside. Someone had climbed onto the roof and gotten into the attic. Multiple times based on the wear patterns. Sarah's dad called a locksmith. They changed all the locks. They installed bars on the attic window. They installed motion sensors around the property. They did everything they could think of. But Sarah could not sleep. She would lie in bed and listen to every sound, every creak of the house settling, every rustle of wind in the trees. She started sleeping with her bedroom door locked and a chair propped against it. Her parents tried to reassure her. They said the cameras were gone. The locks were changed. The motion sensors would alert them if anyone came onto the property. But Sarah did not feel safe. She felt violated. Someone had been watching her grow up. Someone had been in her home. Someone knew everything about her family. When she finally left for college, she felt like she could breathe again. But the feeling did not last, because she knew the person was still out there. She knew they had not been caught. She knew they could still be watching. She got a job. She got married, she had kids. But she never forgot. She never stopped checking her locks. She never stopped looking over her shoulder. And she never lived in a rural area again. She told me this story because she wanted other people to know. She wanted people to pay attention. She said too many small things get dismissed. Too many patterns go unnoticed. And by the time you realize what is happening, it has usually been going on for years. And she said the worst part is not knowing if it ever really stopped. Her parents still live there. The cameras are still running. Max still barks. And Sarah wonders if the person is still out there. Still watching. Just more careful now. Just better at hiding. She said she will never live in a rural area again. She lives in the city now. In an apartment building with neighbors on all sides. She keeps her curtains closed. She checks her locks obsessively. She looks at the background of her photos, searching for anything unusual. Because once you know you have been watched, once you know someone spent years observing you without you knowing, you never really feel safe again. The next story happened years earlier, to a man I used to work with. I will call him Tom. Tom grew up in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. When he was in high school, he worked at a movie theater. He worked evenings and weekends, mostly closing shifts. The theater was downtown, and he would walk home after his shift ended. It was only about a 10-minute walk. Tom said that for about a year, he noticed the same car on his walk home. It was a white van. It would be parked on the street near the theater, and then, as he walked home, he would see it again, parked a few blocks ahead. He thought it was strange, but he figured it was just a coincidence. Maybe the van belonged to someone who lived in that area. Maybe the driver was running errands. But then Tom started paying closer attention. He noticed that the van was never there when he arrived at work, only when he left. And it was always in different spots, but always along his route home. He started varying his route, taking different streets, cutting through alleys, and the van would still be there, somewhere along the way, never following him directly, but always present. Tom mentioned it to his manager at the theater. His manager said to call the police if he ever felt unsafe. But Tom did not feel unsafe exactly. He felt watched. And he did not know if that was enough to call the police about. One night, Tom decided to confront it. When he left work, he saw the van parked down the street. Instead of walking home, he walked directly to the van. He was going to knock on the window and ask what they wanted. But as he got closer, the van started and drove away. Tom tried to see the license plate, but it was covered in mud. He could not make it out. The van did not appear for a few weeks after that. Tom thought maybe he had scared them off, but then it came back. Same white van, same pattern, always somewhere along his route home. Tom told his parents. His dad drove him home from work a few times, but the van did not appear when his dad was there. His parents thought he was exaggerating. They thought he was being paranoid. Tom started to doubt himself. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was seeing patterns that were not there. But then something happened that confirmed his suspicions. Tom was at home one evening, a night he was not working. He heard a noise outside. He looked out his bedroom window and saw the white van parked across the street from his house. Just sitting there. Engine off. No one getting out. Tom ran downstairs and told his dad. His dad went outside, but by the time he got there, the van was gone. His dad said maybe it was someone lost, looking for an address. But Tom knew better. The van had followed him home. The driver knew where he lived. Tom started keeping a log. He wrote down every time he saw the van. The date, the time, the location. Over 3 months, he saw it 27 times. The pattern was undeniable. He took his log to the police. They said they would look into it. But without a license plate or a clear threat, there was not much they could do. They said to call 911 if he ever felt in immediate danger. Tom graduated high school and moved away for college. He never saw the white van again. But years later, he told me something that still gives me chills. He said that when he was packing up his childhood bedroom, he found an old shoebox in the back of his closet. Inside were photos of him. Photos he did not remember anyone taking. Photos of him walking home from work. Photos of him in his front yard. Photos of him through his bedroom window. He had no idea how they got there. He had no idea who took them. He called the police again, but they said that without more evidence there was nothing they could do. The photos were old. The case was cold. Tom still has those photos. He said he keeps them as a reminder. A reminder that someone was watching him for years. Someone who knew his schedule. Someone who knew where he lived. Someone who got close enough to leave those photos in his room without him ever knowing. He does not know who it was. He does not know why. But he knows it was real. Tom said that looking back he could see other signs he had missed. There was a time when his locker at school had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but things were moved around. There was a time when he found his bedroom window unlocked when he knew he had locked it. There was a time when he came home and felt like someone had been in his room, even though nothing was obviously disturbed. He started thinking about all these incidents in connection with the white van. And he realized they all happened during the same time period. The same year. Someone had not just been following him home from work. Someone had been in his school, in his house, in his room. Tom told his parents everything, every incident he could remember. His parents were horrified. They went through his room with him. They found more photos hidden in different places, in a book on his shelf, taped under his desk drawer, folded into his winter coat pocket. Photos of him at school, photos of him with his friends, photos of him through windows. His parents called the police again. The police came and collected all the photos. They dusted for fingerprints. They interviewed Tom and his parents. They took statements. But they never found the person who took the photos. They never identified a suspect. The case went cold. Tom said he spent years looking over his shoulder, years wondering who it was, years wondering if they were still watching. He moved away for college and never came back to that town. He changed his name legally when he was 25. He wanted a fresh start. He wanted to disappear from whoever had been watching him. But he said he still does not feel completely safe. He still checks his home for hidden cameras. He still looks through his belongings for things that do not belong. He still wonders if the person found him, if they know his new name, if they are still watching. He told me he has trust issues now. He has trouble forming close relationships. He has trouble sleeping. He sees a therapist regularly. The surveillance damaged him in ways he is still discovering years later. And he said the worst part is the randomness of it. He does not know why he was chosen. He was just a kid working at a movie theater. There was nothing special about him. Nothing that would explain why someone would spend years watching him and photographing him. It was arbitrary, and that makes it more terrifying. Because if it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. This next story still bothers me. It was told to me by a woman I met at a support group for people who have experienced stalking. I will call her Lisa. Lisa grew up in a suburb outside a major city. Her family lived in a 2-story house on a corner lot. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor, with 2 windows. One faced the street, one faced the side yard. Lisa said that when she was around 14, she started noticing that things in her room would be moved. Small things. A book she left on her desk would be on her nightstand. A hairbrush she left on her dresser would be in her bathroom. She thought she was just forgetting where she put things. She was a teenager. She was distracted. It did not seem like a big deal. But then she started noticing bigger things. Her diary would be moved. She kept it in a drawer in her desk and she was careful to always put it back in the same place. But sometimes, she would find it on her bed. Or on her bookshelf. She asked her mom if she had been in her room. Her mom said no. She asked her younger brother. He said no. Lisa started to feel uneasy. She started locking her door when she left for school. But things still moved. She told her parents she thought someone was coming into her room. They checked the windows. They checked the doors. Everything was locked. They said she must be misremembering where she put things. They said she was stressed about school. That made sense. Lisa tried to believe them. But then, when Lisa was 16, she found something that made her blood run cold. She was cleaning her room, moving furniture to vacuum underneath. She moved her bed away from the wall, and behind the headboard taped to the wall was a photograph of her sleeping, taken from inside her room. She screamed. Her parents came running. They saw the photo. Her dad immediately called the police. The police came and took the photo as evidence. They dusted for fingerprints. They found nothing. They checked the windows and doors again. Everything was secure. They had no explanation for how someone could have gotten in. Lisa's parents installed an alarm system. They put locks on all the windows. They put a lock on Lisa's bedroom door that only she had the key to. Lisa started sleeping with a chair propped against her door. She barely slept. She was terrified. For a few months, nothing happened. No more moved objects. No more photos. Lisa started to relax a little. She thought maybe the alarm system had scared them off. Maybe it was over. But then, when she was 18, about to leave for college, she found another photo. This one was tucked into her yearbook. A photo of her at her high school graduation. Taken from a distance, but clearly focused on her. She had no idea who took it. She had no idea when it was placed in her yearbook. She showed her parents. They called the police again. The police said there was nothing they could do. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No clear suspect. They said it was probably someone she knew. A classmate with a crush. They said to be careful at college. Lisa moved away. She thought she was finally safe. But a few months into her first semester, she received a letter at her dorm. No return address. Inside was another photo. A photo of her moving into her dorm. Someone had been there. Someone had followed her. Lisa went to campus security. She went to the police. She filed reports. She changed dorms. She changed her phone number. She blocked everyone she did not know on social media. But the photos kept coming. Not often. Maybe once or twice a year, always showing that someone was watching. Someone was close. This went on for years. Lisa graduated college. She moved to a different state. She changed her name. She cut ties with almost everyone from her past. And finally, the photos stopped. But Lisa told me that she still does not feel safe. She still checks over her shoulder. She still covers her windows. She still wonders who it was. And she still wonders if they know where she is now. She said the worst part is not knowing. Not knowing who. Not knowing why. Not knowing if it will start again. Lisa started keeping her own journal after the first photo. She documented every strange thing that happened. Every time she felt watched. Every time something seemed out of place. She filled notebook after notebook. She showed her parents the journals. They took them to the police. The police looked through them, but they said most of it was too vague to act on. Feelings are not evidence. Suspicions are not crimes. They told Lisa to keep documenting and to call if anything concrete happened. Lisa started noticing other things. Her friends would mention seeing someone taking photos at events she attended. Always someone in the background. Always someone no one recognized. She started asking her friends to describe the person. The descriptions were always vague. Average height, average build, nothing distinctive. Like a ghost. She started to wonder if the person was following her friends too, if they were documenting everyone in her life. She warned her friends, but most of them thought she was paranoid. They said she was stressed. They said she was imagining things. Only a few believed her. The photos kept coming. One arrived at her job. Slipped under her car windshield wiper while she was at work. A photo of her walking into the building that morning. Someone had been in the parking lot. Someone had been watching her arrive. Lisa quit that job. She got a new one across town. She did not tell anyone where she was going. She used a different route. She changed her schedule. But a month later another photo arrived. This time at her new apartment. A photo of her moving boxes in. Someone had found her. Lisa broke down. She could not take it anymore. She moved in with her parents for a while. She stopped going out. She stopped seeing friends. She felt like a prisoner. The person watching her had taken away her freedom without ever even showing their face. Her parents hired a private investigator. The investigator worked for 3 months. He found nothing. No suspects. No leads. No evidence beyond the photos themselves. He said whoever was doing this was careful, professional, experienced. That word terrified Lisa. Experienced. It meant the person had done this before. It meant she was not the first. It meant there were other victims out there who had been through the same thing. Lisa started searching online for similar stories. She found them, dozens of them, hundreds of them. People who had been photographed without their knowledge. People who had been followed for years. People who had never found out who was watching them or why. She realized she was part of a pattern she had not chosen and could not escape. She joined support groups. She met other people who had experienced the same thing. They shared their stories. They shared their fears. They shared their coping strategies. It helped to know she was not alone, but it also made her realize how common this is. How many people are being watched right now? How many people will never know? The photos eventually stopped. Lisa does not know why. Maybe the person got bored. Maybe they moved on to someone else. Maybe they died. She will never know. But the damage was done. Lisa is in her 30s now. She has not had a serious relationship in years. She does not trust people. She does not feel safe. She still checks for cameras everywhere she goes. She still looks at the backgrounds of photos. She still wonders if the person is out there somewhere. If they kept all the photos, if they still think about her. B. This is the final story. It is the longest and the one that disturbs me the most. It is about a family I knew growing up. I will call them the Hendersons. They lived 3 houses down from me. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I was friends with the boy, who I will call Mark. The Hendersons lived in their house for over 20 years. It was a modest ranch-style home with a big front yard and a porch. Very normal. Very quiet. But over the years, small, strange things happened that they brushed off at the time. It was only later, when they put all the pieces together, that they realized how long they had been watched. The first incident happened when Mark was around 8 years old. His mom, Mrs. Henderson, was doing laundry and found a piece of clothing that did not belong to anyone in the family. It was a child's t-shirt, not Mark's size, not his sister's style. She thought maybe it had gotten mixed up at the laundromat, even though they had their own washer and dryer. She donated it and forgot about it. A few months later, Mark's dad, Mr. Henderson, was mowing the lawn and found a cigarette butt in the bushes near the front window. Neither parent smoked. They thought maybe a neighbor had tossed it there. They threw it away. When Mark was 10, his sister found a toy car in the backyard. It was not hers. It was not Mark's. They had no idea where it came from. They thought maybe a neighborhood kid had left it. They put it in their donation box. These small things kept happening over the years. A water bottle in the garage that no one recognized. A pen on the porch. A scrap of paper in the driveway with a phone number on it that no one knew. The family never thought much of it. They lived in a neighborhood. Things get left behind. People walk by. It is normal. But when Mark was 15, something happened that made them start to question things. Mrs. Henderson was looking through old home videos, digitizing them to preserve them. She was watching a video from Mark's 9th birthday party, filmed in their backyard. In the background, visible through the fence, was a person standing in the neighbor's yard, just standing there, watching. The person was too far away to identify, but they were clearly facing the Hendersons' backyard, clearly watching the party. Mrs. Henderson paused the video and called her husband over. They did not recognize the person. They called the neighbor who lived in that house at the time, but the neighbor had moved years ago. They had no way to ask if they knew who the person was. They kept watching old videos. They found the person in 3 more videos, always in the background, always at a distance, always watching. Different years, different occasions. Christmas, a summer barbecue, Mark's sister's birthday. The family started to feel unsettled. Who was this person? Why were they always there? They went through old photos. They found the person in the background of several photos, always far away, always blurry, always watching. Mr. Henderson started asking neighbors if they remembered seeing someone hanging around over the years. A few neighbors said yes, they remembered seeing a person walking by frequently. Always the same person. Middle-aged, average build. No one thought much of it at the time. People walk in neighborhoods. But the Hendersons started piecing things together. The strange items that had appeared over the years. The person in the videos and photos. They started to think it was all connected. They started to think someone had been watching them for a very long time. They called the police. The police came and looked at the videos and photos. They took a report. But they said without a clear threat or a crime, there was not much they could do. The items could have been left by anyone. The person in the background could have been a neighbor or a passerby. It was all circumstantial. The Hendersons installed security cameras. They started locking their gates. They started paying closer attention to who was around their house. And for a while nothing happened. Everything seemed normal. But then, about a year later, when Mark was 16, he found something that changed everything. He was cleaning out the attic, looking for old sports equipment. In a box of holiday decorations he found a notebook. It was not his. It was not his sister's. It was not his parents'. He opened it. Inside were notes. Pages and pages of notes. Observations about the Henderson family. What time Mr. Henderson left for work. What time Mrs. Henderson went grocery shopping. What activities Mark and his sister were involved in. What cars they drove. What friends visited the house. The notes went back years. 10 years. 12 years. Maybe more. Mark brought the notebook downstairs. His parents read it. They were horrified. Someone had been watching them for over a decade. Someone had been documenting their lives. Someone had been in their attic. In their home. They called the police again. The police took the notebook as evidence. They analyzed the handwriting. They checked for fingerprints. They found nothing. No clear suspect. No leads. The Hendersons did not feel safe in their home anymore. They talked about moving, but they had lived there for over 20 years. Their whole lives were there. They decided to stay, but they increased security. More cameras, more locks. A security system monitored 24 hours a day. And then, a few months later, they received a letter in the mail. No return address. The envelope was typed, not handwritten. Inside was a single sentence. I know you found my notebook. The police took the letter. They said they would investigate, but weeks went by, months went by. Nothing happened. No arrests. No suspects. Just silence. The family lived in fear. They did not know who was watching them. They did not know when it would stop. Mark told me that every time they left the house, they wondered if someone was inside. Every time they came home, they checked every room. Every time they heard a noise at night, they wondered if it was him. When Mark turned 18, he moved out. He went to college across the country. He said he needed to get away. His sister did the same a few years later. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson still live in that house. They told Mark they refused to be driven out of their home. But Mark said his mom does not sleep well anymore. His dad checks the security cameras obsessively. They are always looking over their shoulders. Mark said the worst part is not knowing who it was. They have theories. Maybe a former neighbor. Maybe someone Mrs. Henderson worked with. Maybe someone from Mark's school. But they do not know. And they probably never will. The police closed the case after 2 years. They said there was not enough evidence to pursue it further. The Hendersons were told to stay vigilant and report any new incidents. But there have been no new incidents. No more letters. No more notebooks. Just the knowledge that for over a decade someone was watching. Someone was documenting. Someone was waiting. Mark does not visit home often. He said it does not feel like home anymore. It feels like a place where something bad happened. A place where something bad could happen again. He said he still thinks about the notebook. About all those years of notes. All those observations. He wonders what the person was planning. He wonders if they gave up, or if they are just waiting. The Hendersons' story gets worse. After the letter arrived, they started finding other things. Small things they had dismissed before suddenly seemed significant. Mrs. Henderson remembered that years ago, when Mark was little, she had found a matchbook from a restaurant they frequented in their mailbox. She thought it was junk mail, but it was not junk mail. It was a message. Proof that someone knew where they ate, where they went, what they did. Mr. Henderson remembered finding a receipt in his car for gas he had not purchased, from a station near his work. He thought it was left there by mistake, maybe by a previous owner of the car. But the car was bought new. There was no previous owner. Someone had been in his car. Someone had left it there deliberately. Mark's sister remembered that when she was in middle school, She had received a birthday card with no signature, just "Happy Birthday" written inside. The family thought it was from a distant relative who forgot to sign it. But looking back, no one knew who sent it. And the card had a photo of her on the front, a photo no one in the family had taken. They started going through everything. Every box in the attic, every drawer, every closet. They found more evidence of the surveillance: old calendars with their schedules marked, notes about car repairs, receipts from purchases they had made, all hidden in places they would not normally look, all documenting their lives over years and years. The police came back. They collected everything. They reopened the investigation, but they still could not find who did it. The handwriting did not match anyone in their databases. The fingerprints did not match. The person was a ghost. The Hendersons realized that whoever was watching them had been inside their home many times, over many years, while they were sleeping, while they were at work, while they were on vacation. The person had keys or knew how to pick locks. The person knew their schedules well enough to avoid being seen. Mrs. Henderson started having panic attacks. Mr. Henderson started drinking. Mark and his sister barely came home anymore. The house that had been their safe place for over 2 decades now felt like a crime scene. Every room held the memory of violation. Every corner could be hiding something they had not found yet. They talked to a therapist who specialized in trauma. The therapist said what they were experiencing was a form of psychological terrorism. The goal was not to physically harm them, but to destroy their sense of safety, to make them feel powerless. And it was working. Mark told me his parents are different people now. His mom jumps at every sound. His dad checks the locks 5 or 6 times before bed. They barely sleep. They barely eat. They are prisoners in their own home. And the person who did this to them is still out there, still free. Maybe still watching other families. Maybe still keeping notebooks full of observations. Maybe still breaking into homes and leaving traces of their presence. The police said the case is still open, but Mark knows they are not actively investigating anymore. Too much time has passed. Too many dead ends. Mark said he thinks about the notebook every day, about all those pages of notes, about all those years of observation. He wonders what the person was planning. Was it leading up to something? Or was the watching itself the point? He does not know which possibility is worse. He said his family will never recover from this, even if they moved, even if they sold the house and started over somewhere else. The knowledge that someone watched them for over a decade will always be with them. The knowledge that someone was documenting their lives, waiting, planning, or maybe just observing for the sake of observing. And Mark said the most terrifying part is that they still do not know who it was. It could have been anyone. A neighbor they waved to for years, a coworker of his parents, a teacher from his school, someone they saw every day and never suspected, someone who smiled at them and seemed normal, someone who is still out there right now, living their life knowing exactly what they did to the Henderson family. The not knowing is worse than knowing, Mark said, because you start suspecting everyone. You start seeing threats everywhere. You lose the ability to trust. And that is exactly what the person wanted, to take away their peace, their security, their trust in the world. And sometimes, late at night, Mark gets a feeling that he is being watched. He will be in his apartment, in a city 1,000 miles away from his childhood home, and he will feel it. He will check the windows. He will check the locks. He will look outside, and he will see nothing. But the feeling does not go away. Because once you know you have been watched, once you know someone has been paying attention to you for years without you knowing, you never really feel safe again. You start noticing cars that appear too often. You start noticing people who seem too familiar. You start seeing patterns everywhere. And maybe you are paranoid. Maybe it is nothing. Or maybe, just maybe you are right. Maybe someone is still watching. Maybe they never stopped. Maybe they just got better at hiding. Mark told me he keeps the lights on at night now. He told me he does not open his curtains anymore. He told me he has a camera pointed at his door, just in case. Because he does not know if it is over. He does not know if it will ever be over. And neither do the rest of us. We do not know if we are being watched. We do not know if someone has been documenting our lives. We do not know if years from now we will find a notebook, a photograph, a letter. We do not know if the patterns we have been ignoring will suddenly make sense. All we know is that it happens. It happens more than we think. And by the time we realize it, it has usually been going on for years. So pay attention. Notice the small things. The car that parks on your street too often. The person you see in the background of your photos. The items that appear in your home that do not belong. The feeling that you are being watched. Because you might be right. And if you are, the person watching has probably been there for a very long time. I still think about all of these stories. I think about my own experience. I think about Sarah and the lights in the woods. I think about Tom and the white van. I think about Lisa and the photos. I think about the Hendersons and the notebook. And I think about the fact that in every single case the surveillance went on for years before anyone realized it. Years of being watched. Years of being documented. Years of someone paying attention while we went about our normal lives. Completely unaware. It makes me wonder how many other people are being watched right now. How many people have cameras pointed at their windows? How many people are being followed home from work? How many people are being photographed without their knowledge? How many notebooks are being filled with observations about ordinary families? It makes me wonder if I am still being watched. If the person who watched me as a child is still out there. If they moved on to someone else, or if they are still keeping track of me. If they know where I live now. If they know what I do. If they are reading this. And it makes me wonder about you. If you have ever had that feeling, that sense that someone is paying too much attention, that things do not quite add up, that the same car keeps appearing, that the same person keeps showing up in the background. If you have ever had that feeling, trust it. Because it might be nothing. Or it might be something that has been going on for much longer than you realize.